The calendar, How Luisa Received the Gift, from the Book of Heaven Volume 1, by Luisa Piccarreta. Part 10. 2. Now I will try to explain the second way that Jesus has in speaking, finding herself outside of herself. The soul sees the person of Jesus Christ, for example, as a child, or crucified, or in any other posture, and the soul sees the Lord pronouncing the words from his mouth, and the soul answers from her mouth. Sometimes it happens that the soul begins to converse with Jesus, just as two intimate spouses would do. The speaking of the Lord is very moderate, just 4 or 5 words, and sometimes even just one word. Very rarely it lengthens a little bit. But in those very few words, how much light he introduces into the soul. I seem to see a little rivulet at first sight, but in looking more closely, instead of a rivulet, one can see an immense sea. Such is one word said by Jesus. The immensity of light it leaves in the soul is such, that by chewing it thoroughly, she discovers so many things, sublime and profitable for her soul, as to remain astonished. I believe that if all the learned united together, they would all remain confused and mute at one single word of Jesus. Now, this way is more suitable for the human nature, and it can be manifested easily, because upon entering herself, the soul brings with her that which she has heard from the mouth of our Lord, and she communicates it to the body. It is not so easy when it is through the intellect. To me, I think that Jesus has this way of speaking in order to adapt himself to the human nature. It is not that he needs the word in order to make himself understood, but in this way the soul understands more easily, and she can manifest it to the confessor. In sum, Jesus acts like a most knowledgeable, wise and intelligent teacher, who possesses all sciences to the highest degree, and no one can equal him. But since he finds himself in the midst of disciples who have not yet learned the first syllables of the alphabet, keeping all of the other studies within himself, he teaches the A, B, C to the disciples. Oh, how good is Jesus! He adapts himself to the learned and speaks to them in a very high manner, in such a way that in order to understand him, they have to study well what he tells them. And he adapts himself to the ignorant, pretending to be, he himself, a little bit ignorant, and he speaks in a low manner, in such a way that no one may remain on an empty stomach from the lesson of this divine teacher. 3. The third way in which Jesus speaks to me is when, in speaking, he communicates its very substance to the soul. It seems to me that just as when the Lord created the world, at one word things were created, in the same way, since his word is creative, in the very act in which he pronounces the word, he creates in the soul that very thing which he is saying. As for example, Jesus says to the soul, "See how beautiful things are, but as much as your eye may flow over the earth and in heaven, you will never find a beauty similar to me." At these words of Jesus, the soul feels a certain something divine enter herself. The soul remains so very drawn toward this beauty, and at the same time she loses attraction for all the other things. As beautiful and precious as they may be, they make no impression on her soul. That which remains fixed within her and almost transmuted into her is the beauty of Jesus. Of that beauty she thinks, with that beauty she feels invested, and she remains so enamored that if the Lord did not operate another miracle, her heart would crack, and the soul would breathe her last out of pure love for this beauty of Jesus, so as to fly into heaven and delight in this beauty of Jesus. I myself don't know whether I am speaking nonsense. In order to explain myself better about this substantial speaking of Jesus, I will say something else. Jesus says, "See how pure I am, in you also I want to find purity in everything." At these words the soul feels a divine purity enter into her. This purity is transmuted into herself, and she arrives at living as if she no longer had a body, and so with the other virtues. Oh, how desirable is this speaking of Jesus! As for myself, I would give away everything that is on earth, if I could possess it, to have one of these words of Jesus alone. 4. The fourth way in which Jesus speaks to me is when I find myself inside myself, that is, in the natural state. This also happens in two ways. The first is when, while being inside myself, recollected within the interior of my heart, without articulation of voice or sound to the ear of the body, Jesus speaks interiorly. The second is just like we do it, and sometimes this happens even when I am distracted or I am speaking with other people. But one of these words alone is enough to make me recollect myself if I am distracted, or to give me peace if I am disturbed, or to console me if I am afflicted. I will continue from where I left, saying, and this is how he did it. In the morning, I went to communion, and as soon as I received Jesus, I immediately said to him, My Lord, look at what a storm I find myself in. I should thank you, for you gave light to the confessor in giving me the obedience to suffer, but instead, my nature is so very affected that I myself remain confused at seeing myself so bad. However, all this is nothing. You who want the sacrifice will also give me the strength. But the strongest reason in me is that of having to remain so long without being able to receive you in the sacrament. Who would be able to resist without you? Who will give me the strength? Where shall I find a refreshment in my afflictions? And while saying this, I felt such pains in my heart because of this separation from Jesus in the sacrament, that I cried my heart out. Then, the Lord, compassionating my weakness, told me, Do not fear, I myself will sustain your weakness. You do not know what graces I have prepared for you, and this is why you fear so much. Am I not omnipotent? Will I not be able to make up for the privation of being able to receive me in the sacrament? Therefore, resign yourself, place yourself as though dead in my arms, offer yourself as voluntary victim to repair for the offenses against me, for sinners, and to spare men the deserved scourges, and as a pledge I give you my word that I will not leave you even one day without coming to see you. Up until now you have come to me, from now on I will come to you. Aren't you happy? So I resigned myself to the holy will of God, and I was surprised by this state of sufferings. Now, who can tell the graces that the Lord began to give me? It is impossible to tell everything distinctly. I can say something confusedly. But as much as I can, and in order to do the holy obedience which wants it so, I will try to say as much as it is possible for me. I remember that from the very beginning of my being continuously bedridden, my lover Jesus would make himself seen very often, which he had not done in the past. From the beginning he told me that he wanted me to take on a new way of life in order to dispose myself to that mystical marriage which he had promised me. He would say to me, Beloved of my heart, I have put you in this state so that I might come more freely to converse with you. See, I have freed you of all external occupations, so that, not only your soul, but also your body might be at my disposal, and so that you might remain in continuous holocaust before me. See, had I not drawn you into this bed, since you would have to carry out your family duties and submit yourself to other sacrifices, I could not come so often and let you share in the offenses, just as I receive them. At most, I would have to wait for when you have fulfilled your duties. But now, no, we are free. There is no one left who may bother us and interrupt our conversation. From now on, my afflictions will be yours, and yours will be mine, my sufferings yours, and yours mine, my consolations yours, and yours mine. We will unite all things together, and you will take interest in my things as if they were your own, and so I will do with yours. Between the two of us there will no longer be this is mine, and this is yours, but everything will be in common, on both sides. Do you know how I acted with you? Like a king when he wants to speak with his queen spouse, and she is with other ladies on other affairs. What does the king do? He takes her and brings her inside his room. They close the door, so that no one may go and interrupt their conversation and hear their secrets, and so, once they are alone, they communicate their consolations and their afflictions to each other. Now, if someone, imprudent, went to knock, shouting from behind the door, and did not leave them alone to enjoy their conversation, would the king not take offense? So have I done for you, and in the same way I would be displeased if someone wanted to remove you from that state. He continued to tell me, from you I want perfect conformity to my will, in such a way that your will may be undone within mine, and absolute detachment from everything, so much so, that I want all that is earth to be considered by you as dung and rot, which one is horrified by just looking at. And this because, even though one were not attached to earthly things, just by having them around and looking at them they cast shadow on the celestial things and prevent the fulfillment of that mystical marriage which I promised you. Even more, I want that, just as I was poor, you also imitate me in poverty. You must consider yourself in this bed as a little poor one. The poor are content with anything they have, and they first thank me, and then their benefactors. The same for you, go along with everything that is given to you without asking for this or that, which might be a hindrance in your mind, but with holy indifference, without thinking of whether it may do good or bad, comply with the will of others. This cost me very much at the beginning, especially because of the obediences that the confessor would give me. I don't know why, he wanted me to take quinine, and I was given the obedience that as many times as I would throw up, so many times was I to take food again. Now, quinine would whet my appetite, and sometimes I would feel quite a bit hungry. I would take food, and immediately after taking it, and at times in the very act of taking it, I would be forced to bring it up because of the continuous retching, and so I would remain with the same hunger as before. The word poor which Jesus had spoken to me, would not allow me to dare to ask for anything, and I myself would feel ashamed to ask, thinking to myself, what will the family say? She has just vomited, and now she wants to eat? So I would remain content with being able to offer something to my dear Jesus. However, this did not last for a long time, but only 4 months. One day the Lord told me, repeat to him the request for the obedience not to take quinine and not to take food so many times, for I will give him light. So the confessor came and I told him. And he said to me, so as not to show uniqueness, from now on I want you to take food only once a day, and he suspended the quinine also. In this way, I remained more quiet and hunger went away, but the vomiting did not cease. That one time in which I would take food, I was forced to bring it up. Sometimes the Lord told me to ask for the obedience not to eat, but the confessor has never given me this obedience. He would say to me, it doesn't matter if you throw up, it is another mortification. But I would say this to Jesus, and he would tell me, I want you to ask the question, but with holy indifference I want you to go along with whatever the obedience tells you. And so I continued to do.